Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is Life, Liberty, and Levin, and we have two great guests. Katie Pavlich, how are you?
Nice to see you, Mark. Thank you so much.
Candace Owens, how are you?
Very good to see you.
Two of the great, young, smart, intellectual conservatives who I wanted to have on the program. Now, Katie Pavlich, in 2010, you earned your Bachelor of Arts degree in broadcast journalism from the University of Arizona. After completing your degree, in 2010, you moved to Washington, D.C. You became news editor for townhall.com, contributing editor, Town Hall Magazine, Fox News Channel contributor, and now an alternate co-host for The Five. And you're ubiquitous, as are you, Candace. Candace, you're known for your commentary. You are the director of urban engagement at the conservative advocacy group Turning Point USA. You were pursuing an undergraduate degree in journalism at the University of Rhode Island. You left school. You said, that's enough. You launched socialautopsy.com in 2016, a website where you were exposing bullies and so forth. Now, this is very interesting to me. You really come from different backgrounds. You're both conservatives. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you came at it from a completely different direction. This is something I think about all the time, how to appeal to people, how do we reach out to people from different communities, people from different backgrounds, because I personally think conservatism is the glue that holds society together. Why are you a conservative?
Well, as Margaret Thatcher used to say, the facts of life are conservative, and I think that's really just part of who I am. I grew up in a conservative household. My parents were small business owners, so it really just was kind of part of who we were. They never sat us down and said, you know, this is what the left believes, this is what the right believes, Republicans, Democrats. It was just more of a conversation piece. And I wrote a letter to Bill Clinton when I was 6 years old about taxes and how it was unfair that he was taking our money and we didn't get to spend his money. And he wrote me back with, you know, a generic argument about paying fair shares and all that kind of thing. So that's when it really started. But, you know, I'm a daughter of the American Revolution. My grandpa fought in World War II. I have lots of family members who were in the military. And it really just was part of growing up for me. I didn't realize until high school that the man wearing a cowboy hat on the poster in our garage was actually Ronald Reagan. And so my parents it was how we were. You know, I grew up on 5 acres of land in Flagstaff, Arizona, and we really just lived a conservative lifestyle, personal responsibility, you know, being self-sufficient, you know, being responsible for our own actions, our own future and pursuits. So that's why I'm a conservative. It really just is part of who I am.
Candace, you didn't grow up that way.
I did not.
You've become a fairly recent conservative.
That is true.
How did you reach that point?
Well, I like to say now that the reason I'm conservative is because I used to be a liberal, and I learned a lot. Obviously, growing up in a black household, there's a lot of emphasis placed on black people today being liberals, being Democrats. It's pretty much programmed into us via the public school system that is the only option for us because Republicans, of course, are racist and they want to harm the black community. And I had a different experience in life, realizing that everything in my life seemed to be going wrong. I was blaming the world for everything that was going wrong. There was no personal responsibility because in a lot of these liberal movements, you're essentially taught that there's always someone else that you can blame. And you're pointing the finger at everybody else. You're not looking internally to fix things, and you'll find that things will continue to go wrong. So during the 2016 election cycle, I was watching our wonderful president take a run for the White House, and the conversation was very strange. The rhetoric that the media was using was extremely aggressive. They were trying to convince me that he was a racist, that he was a sexist, that he was a misogynist, at one point that he was incestuous, right? They started that horrible story about Ivanka Trump, and at one point that he was a rapist. And I said, this is very strange. I grew up in a household listening to hip hop music. Trump was glorified in a lot of those music and a lot of those songs. And all of a sudden they wanted me to believe that he was a racist. So I had to ask myself in that moment, is it plausible that racism is being used as a theme to turn black people into single issue voters? And the answer to that question is, of course, yes.
What does conservatism mean to you?
Conservatism to me is, limited government, liberty, and sticking to the Constitution, and realizing that government is not the solution to almost anything, that your community, your family is a solution to everything. Going back to the beginning of the country, we've rejected this communal style of living, going back to the Pilgrims coming here. I mean, being conservative is really just about, making your own decisions, deciding on your own future, and being responsible when you fail, learning from those failures and being able to move on and be successful in your own right, not having to depend on other people to make your success for you. Obviously, you go through life and you have, partnerships and bosses who promote you and give you opportunity, but it's really up to you to take those opportunities and pursue them in a way that makes you successful.
And what does conservatism mean to you?
Well, if you look at the inverse, I think liberalism to me means bondage, and conservatism means freedom. The freedom to choose, the freedom to have responsibility to go after things in life. It's the founding principles of this country, that any person could come to this country with the clothing on their back and make something of themselves. I learned conservatism through my grandfather. I didn't know that was the name. I didn't know these were conservative principles. Starting his life on a sharecropping farm, working tremendously hard, 5 years old, picking cotton and laying tobacco out to dry on a farm. And today he now owns that farm. That was the American dream. And we lost that. We gave that up as government got bigger and the individual got smaller.
And this is all quite important from a philosophical perspective. You just related it to your own family. Is conservatism about individualism?
Absolutely.
Is conservatism about a circle of liberty that surrounds each individual that government must never penetrate? Is this an appealing idea among young people today in college campuses today? I mean, when I was a young guy, it's a little while ago, and I would go college campuses, I have to say, I was fighting. I was in the minority all the time. Mm-hmm. Because the professors weren't any different. They were collectivists, they were tenured, some of them were Marxists, and it all sounds so cool. And we had to fight this. And I thought the people who fought it with me were actually the smarter ones. Is that what's going on today, or is it worse in our colleges today?
Well, I know that parents get really nervous about sending their kids to college because they're concerned about the indoctrination. But for me, going to a liberal university and having that combative role with professors both in political science department and the journalism department really solidified my principles as a conservative and why I am the way I am. And I was challenged every day and had to defend myself and come up with another side of the argument that was valid. And when it comes to other students, I was always leading the charge to try and bring conservative speakers and fighting the administration because they were infringing on our free speech rights by charging us these ridiculous security fees. And so I would say, the campus environment maybe hasn't changed. It is pretty bad. I speak on college campuses a couple times a semester, and there is no room for any kind of thought outside of the Marxism, outside of the socialism. But what I've learned is that the students may buy into that, but when you actually ask them what socialism means, they can't define it. And when you start pointing things out like, each and every one of you are wearing a different pair of shoes, and each and every one of you have a different style backpack or a different style iPod or a different phone case. And it seems really simple, but the fact is that they are individuals on every single level of their life. And socialism and communism and Marxism don't allow them to do that. But you can never blame students especially for something they've never been told. And so I feel like it's my obligation to go to these college campuses and to simply present the other side of an argument, of an idea that they're not getting inside of their classrooms. And oftentimes, I always ask people who disagree with me to come. I tell whatever group is hosting me, invite the college Democrats, invite the college socialists, invite people to come and listen, invite your professors who have been saying these horrible things about my speech already, even though they've never met me or know who I am or even know what I'm going to talk about. And they may come in disagreeing with me and they may leave disagreeing with me, but the rewarding thing is when students come up to me afterwards and say, look, I walked in here disagreeing with you, I still disagree with you, but at least I know where you're coming from. And even better is when they come and say, I totally disagreed with you, but now I agree with you, and I'm going to go and tell 10 of my friends exactly what I learned here tonight.
And you were a journalism major.
I was, yes.
You took journalism courses. That was your major.
Correct.
Was it hard left? Were they indoctrinating people? Is that why journalists in this country are so, almost to a person, yes. There's few exceptions, speak, sound, make the same noises on TV and radio?
That's correct. It definitely is indoctrination. And I will say this, it's much worse today than when I was in school, and we're talking about just a difference of 5 years. What I have observed on college campuses this year.
And you're on college campuses all the time.
Yeah, we do college campus tours. It's terrifying. It's actually terrifying. There's this idea that it's virtuous. You can't speak as a conservative on campus without being boycotted, without being protested, without students lining up and playing music loudly so that they can drown out the sound of your voices. Now, we're not speaking about anything controversial at Turning Point USA. We believe in free markets and capitalism, the founding principles of this country, and the students hate that. And they don't hate that, as Katie mentioned, they don't hate that because they formed these ideas. They hate that because they have been indoctrinated to hate that. So I say that college campuses are literal liberal indoctrination camps. And that is why I understood, especially in terms of me wanting to wake up Black America, which is my highest priority, that was an extremely important vertical to hit. It is how I ended up as a liberal. It is how I ended up thinking that perhaps socialist principles could save the world. The most important battle that we are facing in this country today, and what conservatives did wrong, was handing over the school system to the left, allowing them to take that over. And it is the most important battle that we are fighting today.
And this is a great point. I mean, it essentially is a monopoly, an ideological monopoly. And
right.
Yet this is where we're told academic freedom and free speech. At least, again, when I was going to colleges, even though I was the minority, from a philosophical perspective, they would hear you out. Mm-hmm. We had a few conservative professors. There's less and less of that. So we have this ideological monopoly, let's call it that, on our college campuses, even though there's thousands of them. There's a few exceptions, like Hillsdale College and
right.
Grove City and a few others. But they're the exceptions. What do we do about it?
Well, I would say we need more conservative professors, but that is not the easiest feat in the world.
Let me just point, because the faculty, it's incestuous. The deans, the faculty, they pick from their own schools, they pick people who have their own ideology. I mean, I've been looking into this myself. How do we break the back of this monopoly?
Well, I think that we have to first look at the fact that taxpayers are funding these government institutions. So we call them public schools. They're really government institutions, especially when it comes to universities. They're constantly going to their state legislatures and asking for more money for less productive work and less results. The universities on the public level, the government level, are not responsible for anything that they put out. So they don't care if you go for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, as long as you're paying them money. They don't care if you get a degree in sociology. They actually probably prefer that. But there's no results. They're not trying to get people a job. So how do we change that? First, you talk to your state legislatures about how the universities are taking all of your tax money and they're not actually producing any real world results of students who can then go get real jobs instead of being $100,000 in debt over a women's studies degree.
So pull back the funding?
Pull back some of the funding, look at what they're spending their money on. When I was in college, I would go on a radio show every single Thursday and expose what was happening inside the universities, inside my classroom, what my professors were saying inside the classroom, what they were spending money on. I remember they built a fake border wall across the campus, and they were preventing students. Yeah, they were preventing students from getting to class. And those are the things that student fees are going towards. That's what parents are paying for. That's what taxpayers are footing the bill for. And so exposing that from the inside out is important, because alumni can look at it and say, I'm no longer going to give my money to these universities. I'm going to give them to conservative organizations instead that are actually making a difference on campus. Suing universities is key too, because they think that they're not going to be held accountable by anybody. But when they're infringing on the rights of students, organizations like FIRE have sued on behalf of students. ADF has also sued to say, look, you think you can bully students out of their First Amendment rights by bringing conservative speakers here to simply offer a different point of view? We're not going to put up with that anymore. Right. Their constitutional rights apply on campus and off campus.
When we come back, I want to know what you think too, what we should do about this ideological monopoly on our college campuses. I think these are great ideas, great things that are going on, but I think it is the biggest problem we face when it comes to young people in this country. Don't forget, folks, to join us almost every weeknight on Levin TV. Go to crtv.com/mark, crtv.com/mark, and join us. Or give us a call at 844-LEVIN-TV, 844-LEVIN-TV. And by the way, notice how patriotic our guests are. Red, white, blue, and they didn't plan it.
We did not plan it.
I'll be right back. Katie Pavlich, Candace Owens. I want to start with you again. The ideological monopoly on our college campuses. Have any ideas on how to break this up?
So I can't tell you how many events I've attended, and I've had adults come up to me and say, thank you so much for what you're doing at Turning Point USA. I don't even recognize the school that I went to. Oh, and by the way, I donated to them, and I wrote them a $1 million check. And I say, excuse me, you wrote them a $1 million check, you don't recognize the school? So what Katie is hitting at is correct. You're funding the problem and you're not funding the solution. You know, part of it is also empowering the students. These student government races are so important. These presidencies on campus, they control a large budget and they determine who gets to come speak, and they can block speakers. So it's about that as well, making sure that the students are conservative principles are being won on campus, also through the student body. So that's something that we also do at Turning Point USA. And look, actually being willing to go up and stand up on those college campuses and sit in a chair and talk about your principles despite all of the noise is also incredibly important. So it is a monopoly, but I do see a difference. You know, we started as a very small organization. Now we're on about 1,300 college campuses across the United States. So that's in all 50 states as well. So
what do you think about this rigged faculty recruitment system? I mean, given all the money, public monies that go into these universities and colleges, particularly state money, shouldn't states treat this like they do other issues with respect to antitrust and so forth? What is this tenure after 1 year or 2 years, and you have a Stalinist-style professor who just blabs for the next 30 years and puts in 2 days' worth of work and so forth? This whole thing needs to be exposed, how they do it, how little work they do, how it's incestuous, and these state legislatures need to start getting involved in what's going on, as you point out, these government colleges and universities.
Yeah.
I mean, we're paying for them. It's not like they're these independent private institutions, are they?
Well, and the thing is that leftist professors have the freedom until they get tenure to say what they want, to indoctrinate students in their classrooms, whereas the very limited number of libertarian or conservative professors have to stay quiet until they get their tenured protections. So I had one professor in college who was a libertarian, and he basically had to keep it a secret because he wasn't tenured yet. And he kept saying, once I get tenured, I can be more open in my classroom about the things that I believe, but for now I can't be. So tenure is certainly a huge problem. The other big question that I have for leftists on college campuses, they're constantly preaching about diversity. And yet they are not interested at all in a diversity of ideas in the classroom.
Correct.
The majority of professors, just like the majority of journalists in this country, are leftists, and yet they don't have any concern over the lack of diversity when it comes to differences in ideas.
Well, you see, they want everybody to look different but think the same on college campuses. That's the goal. That's the mission. Everyone should look different but think the same. And so they create an illusion that there is diversity when, in fact, there is none. And we see that every single day at Turning Point. So, look, I am optimistic, though, because what we're allowed to do now is not just about being on campuses. It's a social media battle, too. This is a cultural war we're fighting. So these students, when they're in class, they're not paying attention. They're on their phones. They're on Twitter. They're on Facebook. They're on Instagram. And I think that that's actually where we make the most impact. So being on these college campuses, capturing what's actually happening when we sit in a chair and talk about American principles, capturing that reaction. And then students at home say, wow, when I go to college campus, what do I want to be? Do I want to be a liberal? Or do I want to be a conservative? Do I want to be that individual that's standing up shrieking and yelling and quite literally shrieking and yelling blood-curdling screams because somebody wants to simply speak? Or do I want to be someone that's a little more sophisticated? So I think that that is something that, you know, to put a more optimistic tone to this, that we are winning. We are winning this cultural war. If we weren't winning this cultural war, we wouldn't have our amazing president in office right now.
And I would add to that, too, you know, there's more access to information now than there ever has been. Every single student on a college campus has a cell phone, and they're capable of accessing YouTube, accessing your show, accessing PragerU, and seeing all of the things that they're not being told inside their college campuses, and really getting an education outside of their Marxist leftist professors who only want them to see things from one point of view. One other thing that I do want to mention about college campuses and the way they treat students, and they always have this handbook about the code of conduct, right? And how you're supposed to behave and how you're not supposed to discriminate against a whole list of different groups. Political ideology is not listed in there, and it should be, because conservative students are regularly discriminated against for their viewpoints, and they pay the consequences for it because their professors expect a certain point of view, not just ideologically in the classroom, but in their work, in their papers, in the things that they say, the things that they're submitting towards their degree program. And yet, they're allowed to discriminate in that way. And I don't really understand, based on being consistent with their policies, why that wouldn't be in there.
They have entire groups that discriminate. They have up in Colorado a group that's called Students Against White Supremacy, and they target Turning Point students. Mm-hmm. They accost them in bathrooms, and they yell at them, and they call them white supremacists simply because they believe in free markets and capitalism. This is the sort of thing that is happening on college campuses across the United States.
And do you see this bleeding into the media? I mean, when you watch CNN and MSNBC and some of these other platforms, the hosts, and not just the hosts, the nature of the guests they invite or their regular contributors. I saw you, I think it was on MSNBC, with this fella Dyson. And obviously you wouldn't take any of his stuff. He's a Georgetown University professor.
Correct.
I assume he's tenured. And this guy's full of rage.
Right.
And it's always white, black and white and black, and he's a popular guest on MSNBC. I assume he sometimes shows up on CNN too, but he's not alone. So this narrative that's in the college campus, in the classroom, with these tenured professors, is now being pushed into the general public through media platforms like MSNBC and CNN. Is that right?
That's correct. And what they want to do is divide and separate us and pretend that everything is racist and everything is sexist, and making people go home and feeling that they have a right to be emotional and enraged and angry. And that's exactly why I do what I do, is to present a different perspective that people haven't heard, a more realistic perspective of what's actually going on. I did not grow up in a racist country. Okay, that's just false. And there are many students that believe, when we start our events on college campus, I say, how many of you believe that America is more of a racist country today than it was in the 1920s? Hands will go up. They actually believe that they are living in a country that is more racist today than it was when our grandparents were coming up, than it was when we had Jim Crow laws, and it was when we had slavery. They say it's just shifted. It's a different kind of racism.
Well, I have to say that I've been waiting years for Michael Eric Dyson, Professor Dyson, to meet his match, and I was so happy to see you take him on, because for years I have listened to him and watched him promote that garbage that he does on MSNBC and in his classroom.
He's not the only one.
Sure, right. But what I would say is,
it's not just an African-American professor, you can have white professor, whatever it is, it's the same narrative.
But I would say when they're pushing it out onto the airwaves outside of their bubble of the university, they're more exposed. And people can see their arguments being made and realize that they don't stand up in the real world, which is why these types of professors only exist on college campuses, because they can't survive outside of that. Their arguments don't hold up, their principles don't hold up, and yes, they are indoctrinating students, but the good news is that a lot of them get out of school and get into the real world and realize they were lied to, they wasted a whole lot of their money, and that they're actually more conservative than they thought before.
It's interesting because we have problems getting them right here to talk to me. We'll be right back.
That Katz was competing in the tournament and had lost. The funeral was held today for Molly Tibbetts, the 20-year-old college student who went missing in July. Her father, Rob Tibbetts, asked the more than 1,000 people at his daughter's funeral to remember her by celebrating something wonderful instead of focusing on the way she died. Molly Tibbetts was abducted and stabbed to death while out on a run. Her killer faces life without parole. I'm Lauren Green. Now back to Life, Liberty, and Levin.
Now, Candace, you've mentioned President Trump a few times.
I have.
In a very excited, positive way. Tell me why.
I absolutely love this president. I think that what he did in this country was the most necessary thing by killing political correctness. We were losing this country, and everybody was too politically correct to tell us that we were losing this country. He stood up on a platform and he started telling the truth. And it was timely, because when you look at what's happening in Europe, I think that we would have suffered some of the same consequences that they're suffering if we hadn't had somebody who was tough and willing to take the hits from the media.
In this respect, you're talking about immigration.
I'm talking about immigration and other things too. Standing on a platform and saying to Black America, what do you have to lose. Having everyone in the media interpret that as racism when in fact what's actually been happening to the black community is racist. The Democrat policies that have been inflicted in the black community are racist. When you talk about the welfare system, Lyndon B. Johnson and the proliferation of the welfare state and his Great Society Act, right? Those are the things that were racist. Trump was actually telling us, you guys are losing. So his courage and his strength is what I admire, and the results that he's already brought to this country in the 18 months that he's been in office.
And I saw a recent poll where his popularity in the black community is not only rising, it's like 36%. That's higher than any modern Republican president that I'm aware of.
You're getting me excited right now. I'm going to do a backflip. So yes, that is exactly correct. And despite, the word here is despite every single day, we have CNN, MSNBC, racist, trying to get black people in line. But here's the thing, results. He's producing results.
Let me ask you this, Katie. I literally can't think of a single racist thing this president has done. And yet they continue to call him racist. And I think in part, it's to drag down his growing popularity, not just in the black community, the Latino community, his numbers are up as well. And this whole thing about him racist and he's sympathetic to white supremacists and so forth, it's almost like a propaganda effort in the media, is it not?
Well, first of all, he just deported a Nazi, so I don't think that the white supremacist argument holds up any longer as if it didn't before. But of course it's a tactic because the media, despite their claims of objectivity, they're run by the left, and they're a bunch of leftists who truly believe that if you make the argument against conservatives or anyone you disagree with, that they're racist, you end the argument and then they win. That's not working anymore. Clearly, based on the numbers, people are tuning out of that, including minorities who, I'm not a minority, but I would assume they find it pretty patronizing to think that anytime something is offered or there's a discussion about the situation inside certain communities, that automatically the people trying to solve a problem are racist. I think they're pretty sick and tired of problems not getting solved and these accusations and name-calling continuing to move forward without any kind of results. The left doesn't have any solutions. As Candace said, for 50 years we've been fighting the, quote, war on poverty with no results. It's the right and conservatives who are for school choice instead of protecting unions and allowing kids in minority schools across the country to change schools so that they actually have a future in education. And so for the president, he's walked the walk on that. He's been for school choice. He's talked about going into Chicago and trying to help with the situation there. And he's, most importantly, brought up the economy in a way that allows every single person, regardless of what your skin color is, what your gender is, to succeed. And that's what matters. And
let me just say one thing here, because it's really important that I say this. I don't want to mince words. The left believes that black people and Hispanic people are stupid. That is the truth. They believe that we are stupid. That is why they overuse the word racism at every turn. This is the politicking of fear. It has worked in the past and is no longer working, and they are frantic. And so they keep using more aggressive terminology, white supremacy, white nationalism, hoping that they can strap us in using fear. Okay? It's something that it gets me fired up, obviously, and it's upsetting to me because we've allowed this to happen. This is the reason that when Hillary Clinton was running, rather than going down into the cities and speaking to black people, she simply threw a Jay-Z and a Beyonce concert because she believes that black people are stupid, because we had a monolithic path, and we were proving their point, voting in 90% margins for one party. We were proving their point, and finally, I feel that we are on the brink of seeing that disrupted in this country.
Do you think white liberals, I'll talk like the left. Do you think white liberals, they say, look, we've served these communities. We've redistributed wealth. We've created this program and this program and this program. And we have a few appointees over here and over here that they believe they deserve the black vote and the Latino vote, and they shouldn't really have to work for it.
Well, here's what you have. So when I talk about white liberals, there are two categories for me, evil and ignorant. All right, so ignorant are people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I don't believe that she's an evil person. I believe that she actually thinks that socialism can work. When you talk about people like Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, they know that this doesn't work. They completely understand that their politics are not working. They know what's going on in Chicago. This is why they are silent when 71 black people are shot on the south side of Chicago 2 weeks ago, 60 black people shot on the south side of Chicago last week, and none of them say anything because that's a Democrat-run city. And that's what they intended to happen. So I feel strongly that white liberals that believe that they deserve the black vote fall into those two categories, ones that don't understand how much it's harmed the black community and ones that do and like to keep up more or less the same tactics.
I would say it's beyond that they think they deserve it. They believe they're entitled to it.
Correct.
They believe that after providing things from the government, that they are the ones who are actually saving these kinds of communities, when the fact is that the majority of congressional districts across the country and the majority of cities that are the poorest with the most crime have been run by Democrats for decades. And yet they don't want to take any responsibility for the kinds of results that they have produced. And then they wonder why, when someone like Donald Trump comes along and says you have nothing to lose, why he would say that. Well, it's because they have failed and they want to continue doing the same things to keep these communities down so they can continue to stay in power. That's what they want.
That's correct.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget you can join us almost every weeknight on Levin TV. Levin TV. Here's what you do. Go to crtv.com/mark, crtv.com/mark, or give us a call at 844-LEVIN-TV, 844-LEVIN-TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Okay, feminism. I don't even know what feminism is anymore. What is feminism, Candace?
You see, we both just laughed as soon as you said the word. That really tells you where we're at in this country. With
and
feminism.
I don't self-identify as a feminist, but go ahead.
So similar, what the left likes to do is they take words that once meant something and they use them as political tools to gain power. Feminism is a movement that is now being used by the left as a political tool to gain power. I am a vocal non-feminist. I talk about that all the time. Feminism is toxic today. It's about destructing family values. It's about telling women that there's somehow liberation in hating men and hating relationships, when in fact we understand that a child has the best chances of doing well in society if they have both a mother and a father present. If you need to see the stats on that, look no further than the black community if you want to know why we're doing so bad. It's a lot has to do with the father absence. And I think that when you talk about how hypocritical the left can be, think about the way that they treat Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, the way that they treat Ivanka Trump. They're mocked at, they're laughed at, they're called names, they're referred to in crude terms. Why? Because they don't do what the left wants. They don't say what the left wants. So it really lets you know that women, under the guise of feminism, are not free whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, feminism to me. Well, feminism today, modern feminism, is this bogus idea that you have to be for all women. But the reality is that you have to be a leftist woman who believes in things like socialism, hating men, wearing pink hats on your head, protesting at every single turn.
Abortion.
Abortion at all, anytime, anywhere, for free. My second book, Assault and Flattery, is all about this issue. I wrote it a couple years ago after going to the DNC in 2012. And was listening to speech after speech about how conservatives had a war on women. I'm sure everybody remembers the Mitt Romney binders full of women. And I was sitting there, and it was during a break, and they played this 7-minute-long tribute video to Ted Kennedy. And on the video, they stamped the words, "Women's Rights Champion," across, at a convention claiming to be fighting a war on women. So this really got my idea started for my second book, to combat this narrative that conservatives had a war on women, but it really gave me a bigger picture into where modern feminism actually comes from. And it comes from Marxism, it comes from socialism, it actually comes from Bill Ayers. They wrote a pamphlet called Prairie Fire, and in it they discuss how the nuclear family, which is also based in Marxism, is actually a jail for women, and that they need to be broken out of it, and they needed to take advantage of this new 60s feminist movement for political power. And if you go back to the beginning of the feminist movement, the suffragettes, the first woman in Congress was a Republican, but you don't hear a whole lot about that. The suffragettes weren't about hating men, they were about equal opportunity, they weren't about just equality, or they were about equal opportunity, and yet modern feminism today is completely the opposite, and it's not about women being individuals, standing up on their own with their own lives, being the purveyors of their own future. It's all about being in lockstep with the left, or you don't count as a woman, and you certainly don't count as a feminist.
Isn't this what the left does? It categorizes people, gives them a nomenclature, projects their ideology on top of them, and then demands compliance with it. And then if anybody doesn't agree, this is feminism, this is the black community, this is the Hispanic community, you whites, these are you people, and so forth and so on. Isn't it an attack on individualism, on the ability to think for yourself, on what made this country great in the first place?
That is exactly why I hate movements that are rooted in victimhood, because it's always going to be hijacked by the left, because any movement that is rooted in victimhood means that it's rooted in emotion, and anything that's rooted in emotion is not rational. So when you think about, viral movements like #MeToo or #Black Lives Matter, something that maybe wanted to start as a conversation between police officers and the black community, right, ended up being a full-on assault against the police community, right? It ended up being about hating police officers. The #MeToo movement, which maybe was started as meant to be a conversation between men and women, ended up being about hating men and wanting to take down men that were in powerful positions. It's hard to be a non-feminist, as I am today. You constantly take attacks from the left and people on the right that find comfort in these movements. But it's incredibly important that strong women that understand what's happening and understand how harmful this can be to society stand up and speak out against it. And that's exactly what I do every single day.
When women asked for the right to vote and they were out protesting in the streets, they were standing up as individuals on their own. They weren't acting like victims. They
Correct.
wanted to lead their own lives with opportunity. They weren't falling into this victimhood of the reason why they can't be successful is because the entire system is against us. They came and said, no, we're equal. We want equal opportunity, and they fought for it. But they didn't fall into the grotesque leftist Marxist ideology that we see today with feminism.
We'll be right back. Katie Pavlich, Molly Tibbetts, 20 years old, minding her own business, out jogging, and she is hunted down by an illegal alien. Horrific. I mean, just a nightmare for the family, for the country. And then, true to form, all of a sudden we're being told this has nothing to do with illegal aliens, and really this is one case, and American citizens kill more people than illegal aliens. Why do we get into this debate? Was she not killed by an illegal alien?
Well, the left doesn't want to admit that water is wet, so of course they're going to try and scapegoat the narrative and get it away from the fact that this person was in the country illegally. He committed a heinous crime. We don't know all of the details about what exactly happened. We do know that she's dead and that he led her, the police, to her body. The idea that the left always makes excuses when we hear this case. They say it's a single case. It's not a single case. Molly Tibbetts is dead. There are hundreds of other cases and hundreds of angel families, and thank God President Trump is finally bringing some kind of publicity to them. He had an event at the White House a couple months ago talking about the things that they go through, because the media doesn't care when American families lose a child permanently. We've heard a whole lot about child separation in the last couple of months. Molly Tibbetts has been permanently removed from her family. And as I heard another angel mom say a couple months ago at the White House, she said, when I go visit my son, because we are permanently separated, it's at his gravesite and he's below the ground when I talk to him. And yet there is no recognition of that at all. There's always an excuse for illegality in favor of illegal aliens instead of American citizens who go through this horrific thing almost every week. This is not an isolated case.
Candace?
And it's not just the deaths. Let's talk about the drug problem. When we talk about heroin coming over the border, how many families, we have a heroin epidemic in this country. How many families are victims to that are living with that every single day? And let's really talk about why the left does not want to acknowledge this. Why does the left want open borders? Why does the left want to abolish ICE? For votes. That's it. It's for power. It's all about power. They're willing to forego American children that are dying. They're willing to forego American children that have addictions. They're willing to forego anything as long as they can get votes. And they know that if they can get that community in and they can, make them government dependent and they can make them all Democrats, they have a chance of winning back power in this country. That is the conversation that's not happening. And so it is devastating what happened to Molly Tibbetts. It's something that, kept me up all last night, really thinking about this and what her family is going through, because we were seized by the story. The entire nation was seized by the story. And then to have this conclusion is absolutely heartbreaking, because this is a death that could have and should have been avoided.
We have a president of the United States who's trying to secure the border, trying to back ICE and the Border Patrol. We actually have a political party in this country that doesn't want to secure the border, that wants to abolish federal law enforcement. ICE, people come here illegally into the interior of the country. It is their job to find them and remove them. The Border Patrol is undermined by these individuals as well. I guess this is what President Obama meant by fundamental transformation. We'll be right back.